We're going to get started here in just a couple more minutes. As the sun hopefully comes out, we are able to dry off some of the seats a little bit further towards the front, and if the rain stops, I'll also make my way up there so we can really appreciate the views. So stay tuned. We'll see kind of how the weather treats us. Either way, we're going to go for a boat ride and have lots of fun today.
As you can tell by the umbrella, it is a little drizzly. We are still going to do the boat, architecture boat tour, and then head through the parks over to the art museum. So our boat is loading right now.
Base is the up. You can also notice the main material that's being used for that exterior. It's about 250,000 terracotta clay tiles in 6 different shades of white, or that nice cream color there. This building is illuminated in the night sky. It's quite beautiful, and the way that it is actually lit up in the evening also harkens back to the buildings of the World's Fair from 1893. So if you're not familiar with that whole thing, it was a massive event that was hosted here in Chicago. We'll go into full detail about that World's Fair and its impact to the city, but this is a good example of that architecture kind of being revitalized as well with the design and the illumination of this building. Now, terracotta, which is being used here, is a very fragile building material. So this is also a good example of a building here in Chicago that has to be hand washed. If you're too rough for that terracotta, you do risk breaking the exterior, and so it has to be hand washed using soft bristle brushes and a soapy misting system. We see that happen once every few years or so. All right, as we pass underneath Michigan Avenue DuSable Bridge, coming up just behind me here, you probably know the name. If you don't, well, it's stamped on the side of the building. This is Trump International Hotel and Tower. So it stands at 1,388 feet tall. So this is a pretty good example of some fairly new architecture to our city from 2009. Now, this is also leads us into a full idea within architecture known as contextualism. And contextualism is where a skyscraper or building will complement its surroundings using its own architecture. So if you take a look here, there are 3 unique setback patio balconies. Each one of those patios is designed to match the height of surrounding buildings in this area. For example, the first setback here roughly matches the height of the setback of the Wrigley building behind us. Second there to the left matches the height of skyscrapers across the river. Top right-hand side matches the height of AMA Plaza, which is a black box modernist building coming up directly behind. The river itself was kind of stinky and gross, if we're being honest. So if you were a developer or an architect, you had to do a lot of heavy lifting to try to get people to want to live here, specifically next to the water. So Bertrand Goldberg, that architect, designed Marina City, has this full city within a city experience, taking all these amenities and putting it very close to the residents. Things like grocery stores, shopping centers, a marina for your boat. You also have a restaurant right here. You got valet parking for your car at the base of each one of the towers. There are some fun recreational activities included as well. For example, a full ice skating rink was operational when it first opened. That's no longer in use. But then just underneath the first tower there is a bowling alley in the basement area. And then connected to the side of the second one, there is a music venue known as the Chicago House. Right over here. So this is what we classify as postmodernism, modern classical or neoclassical architecture. Right over here, it's one with the white granite combined with reflective glass. That's 77 West Wacker. So this is a good example of how the architect Ricardo Bofill, Spanish architect, combined some of these newer and older materials together to form this building. So you can notice how the white granite rises all the way to the very top of the building, and the roof is specifically designed to look like a Greek temple and the Parthenon. So lots of people call this one here the Parthenon on steroids. I definitely think it lives up to that name, right? So that is a good hodgepodge. This is the Merchandise Mart. This is a massive Art Deco building from about 1930. So originally it was being used as a furniture warehouse and showrooms for Marshall Field and Company. You might know them nowadays as Macy's department store. And you can definitely check out some key aesthetics that really form this whole identity of Art Deco. You have these deep inset windows. Polished limestone is the main exterior material. Vertical pinstripe columns, clean lines, drawing your eyes up at the top, meant to elongate the building, give you a sense of scale and magnitude and luxury. And you also have these bronze accents all around. So the whole idea with this Art Deco style was just that, luxurious buildings. And it really parallels the 1920s when this style became popular around America. That was a time of economic prosperity in America until the end of the 1920s with the stock market crash in 1929. Then the architecture definitely... Now, looks like we do have some of those L trains passing through. Hard to tell from here, might be the Purple Line train feeding into the loop. But we're going to talk about that building behind the L trains, this upside down pencil-shaped building, on our way down the South Branch a little bit later on. To start with, I want to go here to the right-hand side. So this is Salesforce Tower, brand new to our city from 2023. And then to either side of that, you have Wolf Point East and West, some luxury condos and apartments. Now to the left of all of that, directly in front of us on the river, we also have River Point Tower. River Point Tower. It's from 2017. I like to call this one the Hot Pocket building because it does look like a giant Hot Pocket, I think. Now, to honor this section of the river, we also have a red spiral design right over here. It's known as the Constellation. It's designed by Santiago Calatrava. Now, Santiago Calatrava was actually supposed to have a building in Chicago. It was going to be known as the Chicago Spire Project, located next to Lakeshore Drive on the main branch, and it was going to be the tallest residential structure in North America until it was all canceled in 2008 due to the recession. So we never... Across from there, you can also see the pink building. That's known as the Fulton House. So the Fulton House is actually the oldest building we'll be seeing on the tour today. It dates back to 1898. It's been there a long time. But it did not always look like this because originally there were no windows or balconies. It was simply a giant pink freezer box for the meat packing industry. I mean, that was a huge industry for Chicago, starting around the mid-1800s, lasting until the early 1960s or so, started to taper off. But that went from, let's just say, processing the meat to canning and packaging the meat, and then you have all this processed meat, you got to store it somewhere. That's where this freezer box came in. Now, this building, as you can see, went through a massive renovation about the 1980s by an architect named Harry Weiss to turn these into residential condos and apartments. And while they were doing the renovation, they found out that the 4 feet thick walls of the building were stuffed full of matted horsehair and cork, which was early day insulation for this freezer box. And craziest of all, it was frozen solid. They had to wait about 6 months to completely thaw the building before continuing on with that renovation process. So happy it was turned into something. We found a new use for it. But beautiful patios and balconies. You got a terrace area up at the top, on the roof, trees, flower beds, sidewalks. And I'm sure a very expensive HOA fee as well, right? But all of this facing and kind of embracing what the river has to offer, it really gives us a good visual representation of how the quality is. Just behind me, folks, we do have the Kinsey Street Bridge. This is also known as the Dave Matthews Band Bridge because of the big incident that happened in the early 2000s, so cover your heads, because you might have more than just rain trickling down. Now, this is a good example of one of those trunnion bascule bridges. As I mentioned, bascule, teeter-totter, seesaw, that's what it translates to. And we can actually see how these bridges function here with the Carroll Avenue Bridge. So you have this heavy-weighted bridge in front, and then to balance that, you have the counterweight on the backhand side. So in this case, it's a large lump of concrete, which weighs a few tons, helps to lift it up and down with the help of a small motor. So that's all controlled in the bridge tender house right over there. And you basically press a button, the bridge can open up or down in only about a minute's time or so. So, cannot build the base of your structure there. You can see these portholes, that's where the exhaust fans are for those train lines. Now if you follow those train lines, it also affects this building just in front of us here. This is 150 North Riverside. So on the right hand side there is no base because of those train lines. You just have glass that covers the exterior. But then the left hand side is being affected by something completely different. So back in 2009, an ordinance was passed by the city which requires the base of your structure be set back at least 30 feet from the river, as it has to be reserved for public walking space and public river access. Actually 12 concrete containers that are filled with 160,000 gallons of water. So those are known as inertial slosh dampers, also referred to as tuned mass dampers. And as the wind hits the side of the building, the water inside of the dampers will then slosh back and forth in the opposite direction, giving the building that counterbalance that it needs. You have these steel tripod beams, 3 sets of them across, and each one is responsible for vaulting up the 3rd floor and providing that public walking space underneath. I do love both of Getch Partners' work along the river because I think both are great examples of how within this world of architecture, you're always going to run into these roadblocks and things that you have to work around. 2 North Riverside Plaza, designed by Halliburton Root, completed in the same year, 1929. And that is actually a notable year for Art Deco architecture because the stock market crash changed a lot. Basically, we put a pause in the architecture because you had to get through all the Great Depression stuff, and then leading into the 1940s, that was World War II. So you had roughly 2 decades worth of time, just not a lot of new buildings popping up in downtown Chicago. Art Deco buildings. Well, if you're a developer post-World War II, that's a very appealing offer. You get to have a building here for a cheap price, and so this style becomes quite popular. So it was not. Oh, we do get to see some bridge lifts happening. I forgot. It is still Wednesday, so the bridge lifts are happening. Yep, all these sailboats are making their way out to the lake. So you didn't know you're getting the VIP tour, seeing some of these bridge lifts live. Pretty cool. Now you can see here to the right-hand side, this is some more contextualism going on, right? Reflective glass quality complements the quality and color of the water. Curve also complements the curve of the river. Early 2010s, finally they did something with it. They turned it into a giant map of the Chicago River. The red dot in the middle of the map, that is a "You Are Here" dot. It's exactly where this building is along the river. We got another beautiful, massive Art Deco building. But you might also recognize this building if you've ever seen the Batman trilogy by Christopher Nolan. Yeah, kind of served as a fun little filming location for the Dark Knight movie. Specifically, it served as the Gotham City Bank for Batman the Dark Knight. And they're still using the same original chandeliers inside, if you recognize those. Now, as we continue on, I'm going to do my best to deal with the fog and point out these buildings. Luckily, we can see this next one. There to the right-hand side, you can see another Art Deco structure. Follow the clean lines up to the top. On the roof, there's a statue. Now, that's actually an aluminum statue that's facing away from us. And in the statue's left hand is a bag of corn, and the right is a sheaf of wheat. And that is a statue of the Roman goddess Ceres, the goddess of agriculture. Now that is known as the Chicago Board of Trade building. It's where Chicago originally traded agricultural futures and options on the stock market when the building first opened up in 1930. Now it held the record as the tallest skyscraper in Chicago for about 35 years until it was beat out by the Richard Daley Center in 1935, or 1965. Now the building itself only stands at 604 feet tall, and by modern standards, that's not a very tall skyscraper here in the city, right? But I mean, you got to keep in mind, back then, this was beating records. And so the sculptor of the statue, his name was John H. Storrs, he decided that after adding those details of the sheaf of wheat and bag of corn, he really didn't need to do too much else. He kept the statue relatively simple, and he actually made the executive decision to leave the face completely blank because he didn't think anyone was going to be able to see it because it was so tall, the building. So still to this day, there is no face on the statue for that reason. Kind of interesting. Now another building we can see coming up in front of us there to the right. The pink building with the blue windows, crown up on top, that's 311 South Wacker. I will say it's a fairly standard office building from about 1990, but I give it a shout out because it is in our central view here. But we're going to look just behind that as best we can at least. Now usually I'd be like, this is the star of the show, but there is not really too much of a show going on because half of it is masked by the fog. So you'll have to take my word for it. This is the Sears Tower. Right up to floor 103 out of the 110 floors in total. That's where the sky deck is located. It does give you a full 360 view of the entire downtown area. That one, along with the John Hancock 360 Chicago, is an equally incredible view. So either of those will do you just fine. All right, in between the Royal Sonesta and London House Hotel, you can see the tall, skinny Mather Tower. That is a neo-Gothic building from about 1928. Now, you can see, once again, it's a heavily terracotta-clad building, 1 feet tall, and it also holds the record as the tallest skyscraper in the world ever designed by a woman and a woman-led architecture firm. That's pretty cool. Now, this building uses every method of wind sway reduction we've talked about so far. So if you remember those inertial slosh dampers, it's got a variety of those at different points throughout. You also have those bundled tubes, in this case, just those main ones. But it's a very skinny lot space, right? And then it's located very close to the lakefront. So you get these intense winds from the lake. That puts this building in a very tricky situation. So, you can't see it today, but to the far right, 17 floors from the top, there are actually 2 floors worth of space that are kept completely open. Fifth Third Pavilion with all sorts of fun activities and attractions inside, as well as plenty of chain restaurants. If you want a Margaritaville, there it is. All right, folks. Now that's just gonna about do it for me. If you do take a look to the left-hand side, once again, that fog is kind of obscuring some of our views, but do keep in mind, if you get the black and white filter on your phone, you can put it on top, makes for a very unique experience here. So if you want to stand up, take some photos, capture the skyline as best you can, and then we'll wrap things up on the way back.
All right, that was very interesting, and I am now back at the hotel room. You can see from my window where the boat tour was leaving from. It did get a little chilly on that boat tour, but it was well worth it. I highly recommend that. That was fun. So we're back in the hotel room. Now we're going to head over to the Art Institute.